Yes, I can hear you. You see me eating dinner?
So this is being broadcast, so everybody should be aware.
Because you're in the same room. I was in there last week or last meeting, and he kept having to turn down the computer speaker when I talked so it wouldn't echo.
Well, Tony, Sergeant Wynn's not muted.
Is Deanna in the wings someplace? Huh. I'm going to send her a text.
Yeah.
Well, why don't we go ahead and get started, and hopefully Councilor Hinton will join us shortly. We're recording. We're recording, all right?
Yes, sir.
I'm getting low back.
Can you hear it?
Yeah, come back at me.
Yeah. How about that?
Testing 1, 2, 3. Yeah.
You can just back up.
Yeah.
It's not the ideal situation to have multiple devices in one room doing this, so.
No.
I think Mitch found that out last time.
Oh. No wonder he didn't show back up, huh?
No, I'll be back when my car works.
Okay.
Car's in the shop.
All right. Well, why don't we call this meeting to order? This is the City of Lincoln City City Council meeting of Monday, August 24th, 2020, 6 p.m. And if you don't mind, I'm going to just do a roll call directly. Councilor Casper?
Here.
Councilor Hinton?
Here.
Thank you. Councilor Mark?
Here.
Councilor Parsons?
Here.
And Councilor Hoagland is excused. We're going to suspend the Pledge of Allegiance and go right to the consent agenda. Before we do that, though, let me go back and remind anybody and everybody that we have public comments available at public comment at lincolncity.org. the council chambers are open. If you'd like to come in and make comment here, we have the ability to accommodate you. So, consent agenda, minutes of the regular meeting, August 10th, 2020, and the council has been informed of some changes made. So I'd take a motion.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I move to approve the minutes for City Council on our meeting on August 10th as revised.
A second.
Second. Thank you from Councilor Casper. Thank you. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed with a nay? Hearing none. Okay. Next order of business is public comments. I don't see anyone in the chamber. Mr. Chandler, do you have any comments?
I do. I have a summary. We received 14 public comments prior to this meeting. They've all been submitted to Tony so that they could be put on the record, and a copy was sent to each of the city council members. I might point out that because they're on the record, they will be in future minutes for those who would like to read the comments in full. Mr. Mayor, if you would like, I do have a summary of these.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Okay. As I mentioned, there were a total of 14. 6 pertain to fireworks, 6 pertain to VRD enforcement, 1 pertained to COVID-19, and 1 pertained to commercial rent reductions. On fireworks, as I mentioned, I'm just pulling some of the summary items of it, and if anybody's interested, they will be in future the minutes of this meeting. There was concern about the fire dangers that is created by fireworks. A request to ban all fireworks in the city. The police are overwhelmed and there is a strong culture of leniency. They recommend a zero tolerance approach with complete ban on all types of fireworks with the exceptions of sponsored events. Fireworks are being used as entertainment year-round. Fireworks have become a nightly occurrence. The 4th of July was perhaps the worst ever witnessed in Lincoln City. I support a citywide ban on fireworks. We've had to call about 15 times to complain about the noise. Many of the fireworks are similar to the fireworks you'd see on the 4th, commercial types handled by professionals. The signage prohibiting fireworks on the state park's user guide isn't recognizable and easily ignored. The summary of the VRD enforcement comments are: there is a lack of enforcement as evidenced by violations of occupancy, garbage, etc. The enforcement is poor as evidenced by the lack of follow-through by the city. The scheduling of the VRD enforcement officer is insufficient to cover the problems. There is no limit as to the number of cars that can be parked at a VRD. The city is not enforcing the occupancy limits. Recommendations: remove oversight from the LCPD and create a lodging rev system. Fund a full-time VRD compliance officer where the person devotes all their time to VRD enforcement. Make reports available to the public. A lack of sidewalk and increased attraction of the thumb and north end of the beach has created serious traffic and safety problems. The city management's irresponsible drive to put tourism income and VRD owners' financial demands over the safety and well-being of both residents and visitors has exacerbated the problem. It shouldn't fall on the residents to police the VRDs. Residents shouldn't have to be the first line of enforcement on VRD issues. Having highly visible literature online when VRD's renters secure their reservations and in the home about fireworks, emergency preparedness, trash, etc. Requiring on-site and occupancy checks. I'm concerned about all the people that seem to be gathering in VRDs, 4 to 5 cars of young people partying like everything is usual. Hopefully companies can be fined because they're not supposed to have more than 10 people. Under the COVID-19 subject, request to postpone entering phase 2 by at least a month if Lincoln County moves into phase 2 on September 8th. Under commercial rent reduction, if there is commercial rent reduction granted, can there be wording that the reduction must be passed on to the tenant? That's it, Mayor.
All right. Thank you. We do have an individual that is asked to join. And Tony, if you could let Aaron Lightfoot.
I do believe that he is in the meeting. So.
Okay. Aaron, you'll have the floor. You're muted.
All right, can you guys hear me?
You can.
It's always fun to see who picks what background for Zoom meetings. Good evening, City Council and community members. My name is Aaron Lightfoot. I am the Chief Operating Officer for Meredith Lodging. And as you know, we provide local jobs for vacation rental properties. We provide these services for property owners, for guests, tourists, and to many, many local staff. I noticed something on the agenda tonight that caught my eye related to VRD enforcement. While not knowing what the discussion point is entirely about, and in light of how this year has gone, I want to take a moment to comment on items that we as a company are doing that may provide some guidance for others. As many of you know, we are a locally based company. John and Meredith Oxenholt have worked hard for many years to help create a new standard of living wages for all of our team members, many of which have been with us for years, 10 plus years, and have even been able to purchase homes locally. Our business, as are numerous others, is based on tourism. We employ over 200 people that live and substantially contribute into our local communities and economies. As many of you experienced firsthand, March hit us hard. You can already see some permanent effects from business that essentially were unable to make it out. And who knows how many more will be affected during this upcoming slow season we all know about. We had to furlough over 100 team members. These are community members that buy locally, participate in the local economy on each and every day. We also represent many homeowners who do the same thing, paying for local vendors and businesses and services, fire, police, and even public departments. March brought everything to a complete halt. When things finally started to open back up in June, we wanted to bring back staff as fast as possible, while still following all recommended protocols. Many staff came back having still not received their unemployment checks from the state. They were eager to come back to the highest paying job around. As guests started to come back, we began enacting a few items that provide significant value to the community. Like many companies hopefully do, we require renters to sign policies, which was referenced a few minutes ago as a suggestion. However, we've really found and learned and even felt that more is needed. We all know that reading material is not always actually read. There are some out-of-area companies and owners that might benefit from hearing some of the things that we as a local company do, and I wanted to share with you. We moved quickly to contactless self-check-in at our properties. We want to create distance for the guests. We find that many families actually end up staying at home the entire time. They cook, they order takeout, maybe even delivery, and then they end up just walking the beaches. We clean based on CDC standards, as well as going above and beyond by providing foggers. We provide a local best practices guide. This asks guests to travel only if everyone in their group has had no signs of any fever, cough, or body aches for the last few weeks. Bring a face mask, and hey, if you don't have one, just let us know. We'll provide it for you. Bring as many as your own groceries and supplies as you can, because we don't want to tax the local stores. They have limited supplies, and as we know, limited hours. If you need to purchase something, only send one person. And practice social distancing, even for your dogs, when you enjoy the beaches, parks, or trails. And follow all other state requirements when visiting. We realize that not everyone reads emails, so we also push towards enacting text message communication campaigns, which has a very high engagement, as well as moving to completely digital, a mobile app, which people have been way more involved with than just reading loose papers on the counter. We send security patrol by our properties nightly, which has helped stop many potential issues. We bring staff on now 24/7. I've got someone in offices answering phones, a real person, in addition to local on-call maintenance, housekeeping, as well as managers. As local policies have changed, which we all know they have over the last few months, we've had to communicate frequently with our renters, letting them know what the policies are and how they affect their potential stay. We know that you got to be proactive. Tourism is so important to our local economy, and we want to do all that's possible to ensure that our local staff, visiting guests, as well as local neighbors are able to have a safe and enjoyable time. I want to personally thank you as a city council for keeping tourism important to you, as well as to our town and the local businesses. Thank you also for voting to provide money to local businesses and property owners to help them financially during some difficult and unprecedented times. This is a period that we're still not out of. Thank you all for your time tonight.
Thank you, Aaron.
I'm gonna mute myself. That's what I got.
All right. Thank you, sir. And did I see another one?
The mayor's muted.
Oh,
Okay. Thank you. And I thought I saw Patrick Ryan. Is he still on? He indicated. Evidently not. Okay. Well, let's move on then to our other agenda items. And we have, at this point, annexation 2020-01 and CPA, and CPA and ZC 2020-02. This is the, it's being requested that we forego this and move it to September 14th, 2020. The applicant has agreed, and it's, as I understand, to provide appropriate notice to the public. Is that right, Mr. Apichello?
Yes, the application is for a development agreement. A development agreement requires notice before the governing body. And so the request is to continue this matter to the meeting on the 14th.
And if you could unmute council, we have unanimous consent to transfer, to continue this item to the September 14th.
With me.
Councilor Hinton, you have a question?
I do. Something's been bothering me about this, and I just want to talk about it if I could, if that's all right. We have heard that Richard Townsend will be in his acting position for, I think, 3 months, and he also is a representative for this project. He is being, he's receiving payment for both parts of that. So on behalf of the city, he's helping the applicant work through this process. And he's also on the other side of it, helping his, the person, I guess the Woods, helping them through the process with the city. And so I just find that such a conflict of everything that I think I'd rather see denying this, the annexation and the CPA and the ZC based on all of that until another time. The conflict is too great for me. I'm not able to support it.
Your Honor?
Yes.
I believe that Mr. Townsend is recusing himself on this, and Mr. Chandler was taking the this case. At least that's my recollection of it.
I would like to say that that may be what it looks like, but that's quite hard to believe. Mr. Chandler, as good as he is about doing all the jobs in the city, already has a job, and this just doesn't. It's just not okay for me. And I would also like to say that personally, I like Richard Townsend. We live in the same neighborhood. We're neighbors, and it's not a personal thing at all. It's just as a city councilor and looking at ethical ways of running a government, this just is so very uncomfortable for me. I can't do it.
Mr. Chandler, could you address?
Yeah. I understand, first of all, I understand Councilor Hinton's point on this, but I will say that that's one of the reasons why it is postponed until the 14th. Richard Townsend is not involved in this. He and I have not had any discussions with it and will not have any discussions associated with it. It's also the reason why our new planner is not participating, because at this point in time, he is supervised by Richard Townsend, and so that's why it's been taken on by me, so that there's not a supervisor employee relationship that you may have. So while I understand the councilor's point, and I think it's a well-made point, we are doing our very best to make sure there is no conflict of interest and that the city is well represented in this.
So if there needs to be some type of an agreement, you don't have, no offense, but planning, that's not your background. This is a big project. It's an annexation, and there will be a lot of considerations along the way. We had traffic concerns about this particular project. There were other concerns we had from the people who live behind it. It's too big of a thing to chew on to have Mr. Townsend on both sides of the fence, even though you say he's not working on it. Of course he is. He can't help it. He's an advocate for the project.
Mr. Apicello, could you help us with the any time issues we have with this if we were to delay it further, or what kind of legal obligations for due process?
Yeah, we have an obligation to process this. I do not think that there is a time clock on this because the application includes an annexation, but I do believe we need to give the applicant due process. The timing of the continuance to the 14th was to accommodate a 20-day notice for the consideration of a development agreement by the governing body. I'm not sure that notice got done. I believe it would have had to go out Friday, but I don't know that there would be much of a problem if you were to tonight continue it to the second meeting in September, so that we can make sure we get that done. I do not believe that at this time, I do not believe there is any involvement by Richard Townsend on the city's review of this application. He is, at the time he submitted this, he was doing so as a private person, and he has since taken this position, interim position, but I believe from the beginning he was excluded from this, and Mr. Chandler said that he would handle it. I understand Mr. Chandler has many other jobs, but he also has the ability to consult with land use planners if he wants to hire someone to provide him assistance. So I don't think we're facing a conflict here. We may have a time issue in terms of the noticing, and that's more related to the fact this COVID-19 working from home and getting mailed notices out to owners in the surrounding property may have been difficult to achieve with staff not being in the office full time.
So, oh,
Councilor Casper?
I was just curious to know if there's no timeline, is it possible to postpone this until a permanent planning director is appointed?
I don't see the reason to do that. Honestly, we need to postpone when we have notice requirements that need to be met. Postponing it for a hiring decision. And we're doing the best we can given the situation.
Mr. Chandler, do you have any thoughts there?
I don't have a problem either way with this, whichever the council prefers on this. I would suggest that we talk with the applicant about that, about the postponement of it. But quite frankly, I don't have a problem with the delaying it as long as there's not a legal issue we run into.
Okay.
or an ethical one.
Other counselors, thoughts? We've heard Councilor Hinton's concerns. You've heard Councilor Apichello or City Councilor Apichello say he doesn't see the issue. Mr. Parsons, Councilor Parsons, your thoughts? You're muted there.
Yeah, I have the same concerns as Councilor Hinton. I was just going to wait till we actually start hearing this to bring them up. I'm hearing that I shouldn't have those concerns, but the optics of it say different, and I'm hearing from people that they see it differently also. So those concerns still remain for me.
Okay. Councilor Mark?
I'm just trying to get educated on both sides. I don't really have a strong feeling one way or the other.
Okay.
Your Honor, I don't believe this is going to be a unanimous consent situation. I think you're going to need a motion to continue.
Okay. Councilor Casper, did you have anything else you wanted to, you last raised a question of the time frame. You're mute. You're still on mute.
I was just asking how far it could be continued till we could resolve this, more time allocated.
So, is there somebody going to make a motion? I think it's been recommended if you're looking at continuing to put it out to the second meeting of September, which would be the 28th.
Mr. Mayor, I'll move that we continue this. Is it a hearing?
Yes.
Yes.
Hearing to September 28th.
All right.
On NX 2020-01.
Thank you. Is there a second? Okay.
I'll second.
We have a second from Mr. Parsons. Thank you. Any further discussion?
I just want to say, even though I seconded, I'm still going to bring up my concerns when we do hear this.
Yeah, and as you should. So, Councilor Hinton, you got a discussion item or not?
No, I stand by what I said.
Okay, that's fine. Can we do a roll call?
Henderson?
Yes.
Casper?
Yes.
Hinton?
No.
Oakland's absent. Mark?
Yes.
Parsons?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Okay, thank you. We have, next item is public comment for North Lincoln Sanitary Rate Review. And looking to see if there's, all right. Tina, you're Yep, you're unmuted. You have the floor.
All right, thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and councilors. I am Tina French with North Lincoln Sanitary, and I normally would call this the State of the Trash Address, but unfortunately I don't have a presentation for you other than what you have in front of you. This is our annual rate review time. We did decide to delay it this year until September because of the financial situation that we found ourselves in, fully expecting that we would be on the other side of this. While we have seen some improvement, we are not where we thought we would be, but here we are. So just as a little refresher, in the odd years, our rate review is a CPI. And so we take 2 years of the CPI and take 85% of the combination of those 2 years, which brings us to 3.6% this year on our CPI. A couple of things to just point out that are a little bit different this year. Up under the revenue column, under other revenue, we have included the PPP CARES Act, which we were very fortunate to receive right away, which helped us to make our payroll, to pay all of our employees. And so you'll see that number under the projected adjustments in the revenue column. And then just other fairly large changes are in our disposal. That is directly related to COVID as well. We lost about 60% of our tonnage starting in March, and that went through about mid-June. We still haven't recovered completely, but obviously we're seeing an uptick in that. That's a no-brainer if you look at what's happening in town. So any of the credit adjustments that you're seeing are directly related to disposal going down. So those are things that are based on disposal, except for fuel. Fuel, we're just seeing a decrease in the price. So we use the same amount of fuel. Our labor, actually, we saw very little decrease in our labor because those trucks still have to run down the same roads, even though they're not making as many stops. We still had to run the same routes with the same trucks and the same drivers every day. So that's the big change. If anybody has any questions, please interrupt me. It's a little awkward, just.
Well, actually, as a reminder, the finances get provided to our finance department, and they go through it, and that's what's happened. We don't actually have the finances, but it's helpful that you're pointing out. Okay. You're pointing out some of the high points and things that have changed. So, Councilor Mark.
Yeah, thank you, Tina. It's always interesting to hear your reports. I'm just. Well, I'll guess that the audience might have the same question. So because tourism was down in the spring, trash was down, and so your revenue was down, but doesn't that also reduce your costs? I mean, you're not dumping as much. So I was a little surprised that you needed to go to the payroll for help for the payroll. I mean, I don't doubt that you had valid reason. It just surprised me that you would need to do that.
So the only decrease in cost that we really saw was in our disposal, which I didn't realize you didn't have this in front of you. So we saw about a $60,000 decrease in disposal. So instead of just about $1 million of disposal, we saw just over $900,000 of disposal from 19 to what we're projecting into 20. And it's a little bit weird how we do this because I'm giving you the 2019 rate review, and I have to project into 20. And we had to try to do our best, in March to figure out what the rest of 2020 was going to look like budget-wise. And so what I did is I actually created my COVID spreadsheet and our whole industry did this. It was fairly interesting. We all shared our different ways that we were keeping track of our revenue loss. So we kept track of it by municipality and by service type. So residential stayed even, and actually we saw a tiny bit of a decrease in residential, obviously because everybody's home. And we saw a huge decrease in residential. Decrease in commercial. Just for calculating in your head's sake, 60% of our revenue in Lincoln City is from our commercial side of the business. So you would have to have huge increases in residential to make up for 60% of your loss of revenue in commercial. If you follow that?
Yeah, you're dumping less, and even though you got to send the trucks, I imagine it's taking them less time to complete the routes, and there had to be
take them
concurrent.
Sure, and it did take a bit of less time. Our payroll was slightly down, not as drastically as I would have thought. And so when we did our route studies, which we do on a regular basis, we actually did some extra route studies for our commercial routes during COVID because of that, because it's like maybe we can, eliminate a commercial route. The problem is that a lot of businesses were still having some pickup. And so maybe we were stopping and dumping one of their 5 containers. So you're still stopping at that stop. You're just not picking up the same amount of volume. And so yes, that saves you some time, but there's a base number of time that it takes if you were just to get into the truck and drive the route and not stop at any stops, that takes X number of time. And so that was the issue. So we didn't let one employee go. All of our employees stayed employed. We did do some moving around with employees. We actually, since our recycling center was closed for a period of time, we didn't keep it closed very long. As soon as we felt safe and our employee that mans the recycling center felt safe, we opened it back up for people so they could drop off their glass and cardboard and just, kind of closed off how close you could get to him. But we did do some shifting around. We did some projects that we normally save for wintertime, just to keep everybody employed. And now we're honestly busier than we have been in quite some time.
And Tina, I think you mentioned it at the start, but this is really an increase for the next 2 years, correct?
So yeah, the last time our last rate increase was in 2018. And unfortunately, that was a gigantic rate increase because of what we saw with the China markets. That's actually the largest rate increase that we've ever had in 55 years of doing business. So that was not a CPI increase, but normally it should have been. But under emergency circumstances, when you have a huge change, but if all things being as normal as they can be, unfortunately, because of the PPP, we were able to recover that lost income, and so the CPI is going to be just fine for us this year.
And the emergency, to remind people, was when the China market went out with recycling, because you were making money on recycling, and that helped us keep the costs down.
Yeah, we still pay almost double per ton to drop off recycling as we do garbage.
Mayor?
Yes.
I just wanted to add, there is a provision, just for clarification, there is a provision in the ordinance on a non-CPI year. There could be a rate adjustment if financial forecasts support it. It's not normally, it's very infrequently done, but it is. I just wanted to clarify that it is.
For emergencies and that kind of stuff, yeah. All right, so other questions. Councilor Hinton, you're muted.
Now I'm fine. Hi, Tina. I just have a question for you because we don't have all the paperwork in front of us. And what I have is that you are requesting the 3.6% increase, and that's over the next 2 years, beginning September 1st. There's two things. I don't know what that relates to as like a residential pickup, because we don't have those numbers. And secondly, September 1st is just days away, and it's not much notice to folks. And so I just have a concern about that.
So your first question, I'll answer both of them. So 32-gallon roll cart picked up once a week, which is the majority of our residences, is going from $20.56 to $21.30. Our average commercial customer is a 1.5 yard picked up once a week. That's going from $135.29 per month to $140.12 per month.
So it's at a 74 cents increase for the residential?
Yes. So the second question, Councilor Hinton, is we bill in the rears. And so we will be sending a notification out September 1st that the September rate is going up, but they will be billed for that on October 1st.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. And, this would be also a good time, Tina, would you remind us, we've talked at different times where we have a venue of choices. People can delay pickups, alternate weeks, different size containers, on call, all sorts of fashion. Is that not correct?
That's correct. So we have 3 different sizes of roll carts: 32-gallon, 64-gallon, and 96-gallon. We offer weekly pickup, every other week pickup, once a month pickup, or on-call pickup. And so you can have any of those. I do want to say publicly that the on-call pickup is in violation of the Lincoln City Ordinance. But I guess we have a verbal agreement that we're offering it and you're not enforcing, and we offer it. And so, the code says that you have to have a minimum of every other week pickup currently. But we do offer on-call pickup, and honestly, I don't think people that need regular pickup have on-call pickup. It's cost prohibitive to, have on-call pickup if you need more service than just, you have a second home here. It's not a vacation rental, and you come down and use it once a month or every couple months and want to pick up. So, that is a service we provide. We also allow you to stop your service temporarily if you're traveling, and you receive credit for that. If you are just a part-time resident, you can stop your service for up to 6 months. So we have lots of options.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions from City Council? Mr. Chandler, is there anybody in the queue for public comments or questions on this?
No, sir.
Okay. And I don't think there's anybody in the Zoom meetings for that topic either. Okay, thank you, Tina. We've got a resolution. Shoot, go ahead.
Okay. Well, different topic, same master topic, I guess, is I was asked to discuss the education plan for the upcoming yard debris and food collection program. And I shared that. Hopefully everybody got a copy of our first piece of education print that we have done. It looks like this, if anybody can see it.
Yes, that was attached.
Okay. So that is our first piece of educational. Our plan is to launch the education portion of this program in January, so that we get people, up to speed. So when those roll carts are delivered to their homes, probably the last week of February, They know what they're for, they know what to do with it, and they're ready to roll. I just talked to the manufacturer of the roll carts today. We will be impregnating the lid with a similar graphic. I don't know if any of you remember when we rolled out the recycling program, we impregnated the lid with what goes in that roll cart. So these roll carts will be blue with a brown lid, and then have the education information imprinted right in the lid of what goes in it.
Great.
And then the other exciting news is we have a brand new solid waste director from the Lincoln County Solid Waste District. His name is Paul Seitz. He's great. I've known Paul for 25 years. He's been in the solid waste industry, and he is very knowledgeable about the solid waste industry. He's worked in other municipalities that have rolled out composting programs, and his first big project is to work with North County on rolling out this project. He was very excited to get into the schools and very disappointed to find out that we couldn't get into the schools. But we're still going to work. We're trying to find a local artist to work with children to create an educational piece that has children's art and local art. So he has lots of great ideas and lots of time, which is terrific because I need that. And so he's a huge asset to our community, and I'm really excited. And I was super excited to hear him say that he wanted to start working with Norfolk County, because that has been something that has not always happened in the past.
Yes.
So,
and you'll be
great
pleased
asset.
You'll be pleased to know that Councilor Casper has been good stead of keeping us informed of your activities and the others in the county. So.
And I want to thank Judy too, because she has been a huge asset at the Lincoln County Solid Waste Advisory Committee level. Lincoln City has not always had great representation down there, and Judy is terrific. She is there, she's engaged, and she's good about asking for stuff for North County, which I always like a teammate in that. So I appreciate Judy's leadership down there and her time.
Great, thank you. And we'll take care of, we've got a resolution coming up and a couple of items on this stuff. So, Councilor Mark, you're muted. There you
go. Tina, I'm going to do a little aside real quick, because down at Neighbors for Kids, we had a bit of a unexpected situation, and we had to clean out an area of the building, and we filled up many trash receptacles over the past 5 days, and North Lincoln was terrific in responding to our problem and made several pickups that weren't on their normal schedule and really bailed us out of a difficult situation. So I really appreciated that. But that was not really the point I wanted to make, which was, we're getting a lot of, we are hearing concerns from citizens on the composting, and the one concern is the size of the containers. And was there an option that was one thing. And also want to, and they're concerned about the cost. And I'm reminding myself as I'm looking at the fee schedule that I'm sure that when I put my garbage out every week, 2/3 of it is probably compostable. So I am thinking in my mind for my household budget that I will be able to go to every other week on the non-compostable stuff, and that cost looks like it balances out. So I just want to, maybe you can address that and maybe help people understand that.
And just to address that, Councilor Mark, we the program is set up for a 96-gallon roll cart. But just like when we rolled out curbside recycling, we understand that doesn't work for 100% of our customers. So we will be delivering a 96-gallon roll cart, but we will also be offering, if you don't want that and you want a 64 or a 32, we will be offering that to come and pick up that 96 and deliver a smaller size for you. Because if you're a single woman, you probably don't need a 96-gallon roll cart unless you have a large yard. But if you live in a, a small plot, small home, and it's just you, we understand that it's not a one size fits all. So we will do our very best to get you a can size that as quickly as possible. It will take us a couple weeks because there's lots of trading in and out, but we will get on it as fast as possible.
Thank you. Thanks, Tina. Any other questions? Councilor Casper.
I just have a comment. I wanted to thank North Lincoln for picking up the solve bags. When I was at the SWAC meeting, it became apparent that other haulers will charge Parks and Recs or City for picking up solve bags because Solve doesn't pay for it anymore. And North Lincoln just picks them up at whatever sites are designated. So I think that's a pretty good garbage heart for them. Thank you.
We'll also accept those if people bring them to us. So we've actually partnered with the city in the past. The VCB had a program where they had bags and they were given out to visitors or residents. And if they brought them in, there was a little contest and we gave them a ticket and then they filled out that ticket and took it to the VCB at the time and they got entered for a float. But we are happy to take litter off of the beach. That's part of our responsibility as a community member. So,
thank you. All right. Thank you, Tina. And if there's no more questions, we'll close that public comment period and move on to the next ordinance item. And we have an ordinance 2020-19. This is to do with the Bard Road LID. Mr. Apicello.
Apologize, I muted myself, and hard to jump back and forth when you're working remotely. Your Honor, Council, this is ordinance 2020-19, an ordinance of the City of Lincoln City amending ordinance 2020-18, Southwest Bard Road Sanitary Sewer Local Improvement District, to set the administrative fee consistent with prior approved local improvement districts. Ask for approval of first reading, and if it's unanimous, we can proceed with second reading. Council, Your Honor, this was basically in the engineering report, there was a line that said the administrative fee would be 0.5% of the assessment. And of course, that's never been done. We've always used a flat $100 fee. Just got past us. It's not really equitable because staff, it doesn't matter what the assessment is. It's the same paperwork. If you have, a 24 unit assessment or a 2 unit assessment. So staff is requesting, specifically finance staff and engineering staff is requesting that we amend this ordinance to make the fee uniform and consistent with what we've previously used. I did ask, because it's a fee, that you ask the public if they have any comment on this fee.
All right. Why don't we put the motion on the table first, and then we'll ask the public to entertain a motion.
I move to pass first reading of ordinance 2020-19 with amended corrections.
Second.
We have Councilor Castro making the motion with Councilor Parsons with the second. And before we go into discussion, is there any comments from the public regarding this fee, a fixed fee versus a percentage? And Mr. Chandler, I'm wondering if somebody's come in on, okay, nothing there. All right. Discussion items, Council? Seeing, hearing none, pretty straightforward. So how about since it is a fee issue, or we have the motion, how about a roll call, please?
Anderson?
Yes.
Casper?
Yes.
Hinton,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Parsons,
Yes.
motion passes.
Great. Thank you very much.
Your Honor, Council, this is second reading of ordinance 2020-19, an ordinance of the City of Lincoln City, amending ordinance 2020-18, Southwest Bard Road Sanitary Sewer Local Improvement District, to set the administrative fee consistent with prior approved local improvement districts. Ask for approval of second reading and adoption of the ordinance.
I move to pass, I move to accept the second reading of 2020-19 and pass the ordinance.
Second.
We have a motion to approve from Councilor Casper and a second from Councilor Parsons. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Anderson,
Yes.
Casper,
Yes.
Hinton,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Parsons,
Yes.
motion passes.
Thank you. All right, moving to resolutions. We have resolutions number 2020-19, a resolution of the City of Lincoln City adopting an increase in rates for the North Lincoln Sanitary Service. Entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I will move that we adopt the fee increase in resolution 2020-19.
I'll second it.
We have a second from Councilor Hinton and a motion by Councilor Mark. Discussion. Hearing none. All right. Roll call, please.
Anderson,
Yes.
Casper,
Yes.
Hinton,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Parsons,
Yes.
motion passes.
Great. Thank you. All right. Moving to special order of business. We have an economic development local program support grant request from the Small Business Development Center for programs 2020 and 2021. And I think Mr. Price is in the audience. And Allison.
Hi, Mayor and Council. Thanks so much for having us tonight. I'm here just to, help answer any questions about this program, as is Mr. Price. And this is the first local program support grant request that has come before the city. As you might remember, earlier this year, you all created an economic development toolbox that was basically the same as the Urban Renewal Agency's economic development toolbox, which included the local program support grant. Partly why we wanted to do that is because Urban Renewal's toolbox funding is coming to a close in the next year or two as that revolving fund continues to go out and come back in. But for grants, the funding is not quite as flush as it used to be. The Small Business Development Center has been working within the Urban Renewal District boundary for a number of years now through this program. And we had discussed how it would broaden the possible client base for the SBDC if there were a city program where it could be offered to anyone within the city limits rather than restricted to that urban renewal boundary. Just a quick coverage of the application request. There are 3 projects that have been proposed for a grant request, and those involve small business management program scholarships, COVID business recovery and redevelopment advising, in addition to small business classes and workshops. Mr. Price and I are happy to answer any questions that you have either about the program specifics or generally about the criteria that you all have set up for this program.
Great. Mr. Price, would you like to lead in with anything, or does that?
Well, I think she did a great job of summarizing. Thanks very much for having me. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, great. Yeah, we're really excited to be able to apply again this year. I think this would make it something like the 7th consecutive year, if I'm not mistaken, if we were fortunate enough to get that. Now, I understand that actually, pardon me, 8th. Sorry, Allison was about to get, guys. I saw you looking around saying, no, wait a minute. I totally understand that since I first presented a few months ago, it was actually live in the room, which tells you it was an eon ago, when we sort of summarized the year just ended. And to the extent we could, that was, I believe, at the start of our spring term. Our spring term, which basically vanished. We took all of our spring workshops and eliminated the cost and made them all online and made them all free, which meant we didn't spend a dime of your money after the winter term was complete. And that's been true to form, that we just leave unspent everything. We don't collect any cash up front, as it were. We only bill when a business in Lincoln County takes advantage of a program and signs up, and we calculate those and submit those bills quarterly. And I think a frustration of, maybe that's not the right word, but something that comes up in these conversations every year that I'm with you is, hey, you didn't spend everything we offered to you, and why is that? And is there something you could do to improve that performance? And that's a fair question. And it's usually bounced around $4,000, $5,000, $7,000. In 18-19, $12,000 wasn't spent. And then last year, the outlier, almost 14, wasn't spent. And again, that's a little tricky to look at, just because so many things came to a halt around the end of the calendar year and midway through our academic year, and this sort of crosses over those, and it's kind of confusing because we're talking about programs that begin in September, October, and run through June, July, not to mention our summer term, which also no one took advantage of anything this year. I want to thank Allison for that summary, and I'd just be happy to field any questions you might have. I guess the thing I would say is, I totally understand. There's never been a time that I've come before you and assumed, wow, I bet we're going to get this grant funding for our businesses in Lincoln City. But this would be the year that I would expect that most of all. I'm sorry, it's not going to happen, because I totally understand what COVID has done to your coffers and to Toledo and Depot Bay and Newport and beyond. So I understand this is an uphill ask, but I would submit that if ever there's been a year when programming like this is going to be valuable, it just might be 2021. We can talk about metrics of how many businesses we've seen and capital we've raised if you want to over the last few months. But with that, I'll just happy to field your questions. And Allison, if there's anything I didn't touch on there, jump in.
Dave, you've got a three-pronged ask, and the one that you spoke most about there is the standard program. And again, the nice thing about you not using all the funds is we haven't been overrun with other requests either. So, it sits in the coffers, so to speak. So there's no harm, hasn't been a harm, and you haven't penalized anybody else by us granting, for example, $20,000 to you and you not using it. Nobody goes away tomorrow unused. So that shouldn't bother you. Would you mind going into these other two, proposal project 2 and proposal project 3? Because I think it speaks so well of what you've done through the community college and the Small Business Development Center. And I think these are very appealing. So I would assume we would make a motion to approve your entire application request, unless you want us to do one at a time.
You approach that however you want, but just to address your questions there, Mr. Mayor, I think there's one outlier. There's one thing that's really different about this ask to the previous 7, and that is that in the past we've separated our funding request, generally speaking, most of those years into 2 buckets. Buckets for scholarships for any course you might want, a series of marketing courses for social media, something I think is going to be critical in the recovery phase, a series of, we have a class coming up this fall called Financial Statements, What Are They Good For? And there's a reason why we're offering that, and it's because we had way too many clients over the past 120, 180 days who went to a loan officer and they said, well, you know, we're going to need to see your history and, you know, the back of an envelope and I guess that, you know, what your profit is or might not have been is not cutting it. Even for some of the federal programs, like Tina talked about the value of PPP. Some folks we knew were turned away from PPP, at least at first, because they didn't have the record keeping. So we don't want anyone to get caught like that. Heaven forbid there's a second spike or some other event that comes later. So anyway, those courses are generally inexpensive, $30, $90, whatever, depends on how many times they meet. But still, they can be just enough that, you know, at first it's the time away. I got to hire someone to watch the shop, and now I got to pay $90. So if we can eliminate that part of the hurdle, that's where this has had value. So that's one bucket. And then the other bucket is our small business management program. And that is a much larger program. It's year long. It's a series of monthly classes. It's monthly one-on-one advising, and it's goal setting at the outset that says, hey, at the end of the year, I want to do this, this, and this. And we work to get them there. In many cases, what we're hearing from early registrants this year is, I want to build back. And so that's going to be an interesting hill to climb. But those are the 2 fundamental buckets that you're accustomed to. What you're not accustomed to seeing is the proposal, I'm trying to find the name of it, but it is basically where we're saying we want to set aside advising resources for Lincoln City businesses, because that is one area where we have in the past, on occasion, and when I came aboard in 2012, we were in a space like this where we were turning away some counseling advising appointment folks and asking them, look, we don't have the resources to pay to advise you because of the volume we have and because we only get so much funding. We get the same amount of funding from the SBA that we got in 1985. We get the same amount from the county that we got since 2009, and that's it. And the college has been hammered like everyone else. So we don't have a lot of new revenue coming in outside of grants that we're busily writing wherever we can. And so I don't want us to get to this position, but it's conceivable we might run out of counseling money again, like we did in the recession, and say, we'd like to offer you these classes in exchange instead of a counseling appointment. And for most people, that's helpful, but it's not ideal, because the ideal is to sit down with someone, either via Zoom like this or in person, and share their specific concerns. And a lot of people have, I know when I ran a business, I had laundry I didn't necessarily want to share in a group of people like this. And so it's our goal to say, and Lincoln City is not the only municipality that we're going to approach with this sort of ask for help in this interesting year. I don't know that we'll do it again. I hope we don't do it again. And you can call me on that, because this will be easily referred to next year. But that's what that bucket is, Mr. Mayor. It's for the advising services. We think we picked an arbitrary figure and said, well, could we set aside enough to do 500 hours of counseling over the next year? And I think we would only approach that if things got really, really a lot worse.
Thank you. Questions from council? Councilor Mark?
Not a question. I just wanted to say I appreciate, Dave, the solid, practical examples of what you're doing and why this is helpful. And I know we've heard from participants in the past expressing appreciation for the programs. So I just for the programs that you run. So I just want to remind people of that.
Thanks. And I can tell you, I've sat in on way too many Zoom meetings through the Small Business Development Center through the COVID. And Dave, through you and the community college have served quite a very positive vehicle for business and us who listen in and need the input from business. So I'm really very pleased that you've been here and played that role. I know business has benefited from you, and I want to thank you publicly because you aren't bashful about thanking the city of Lincoln City back and the urban renewal department of old and city, this time of what we've done also to help business. So it's nice to have a cheer and an applause coming back at us. So thank you.
Well, no, thank you. I mean, everything we applaud you is more than deserved, and we appreciate the support. And also, I mean, I think Tina or Aaron mentioned it, but I think it was Aaron. Your investment in small businesses earlier during the pandemic with the sort of grant exchange program was well-timed and generous, and I just want to say thanks again for that.
Given no further discussion, I'd take Councilor Parsons, please. Oh, there you go.
I just had a quick question. I think it's going to be for Allison. In the council communication under budget, it says that we can delay some other work on contracted services. What would that work that we would be delaying be?
Yeah, part of it is that we have not worked on any of the budgeting, the background information in preparation for another urban renewal area. We've been busy with other projects, and so we have that project, and then we also had planned on some miscellaneous contracted services to help us basically wrap up the sunsetting of the existing urban renewal area. And actually the existing urban renewal area, would be under the Urban Renewal Agency's budget, not under the city's budget. But exploring another option for new urban renewal area would be under the city's budget, as it is within the city's authority to form new areas. So that would be the most of that. And then I can't remember the other project, but basically those things we kind of thought we would have been working on more concertedly for the last 2 or 3 months, which has basically just kind of gone through this COVID-19 pandemic, and we have not kept up the pace that we anticipated when we created the proposed budget in January. So.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
To entertain a motion. Councilor Casper.
I move to approve the local program support city grant request to the Development Center in the amount of $24,900.
I'll second.
A motion from Councilor Casper, a second from Councilor Parsons. Any further discussion? Councilor Hinton, did you? Okay. How about a roll call, please?
Anderson?
Yes.
Casper?
Yes.
Hinton?
Yes.
Martin?
Yes.
Parsons?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Great. There you go, David. Go off and do some good work, will you please?
Well, thank you. And a parting note, some of our courses will be delivered live from the Lincoln City Center this year, socially distanced, lots of space, and also available via Zoom. If you'd like to pop in, if you haven't been to a workshop in the past, maybe this is the fall to do it. So, thank you.
You bet. And
I think it's
Debbie?
I think it's the Lincoln City Cultural Center. You might want to get the name.
No, the Lincoln City Center of Oregon Coast Community College.
Oh, okay.
Democrat sector national convention.
And Debbie, did you?
Who is he?
He's the guy talking about communism.
Kevin, you need to mute.
It's pretty good. It's been really good.
Washington, in Seattle, and Chicago.
Thank you. All right. Let's move on. How about next item of business, economic development, a commercial lease. This is the discussion on the Salmon Drift Creek watershed council request for rent reduction. Mr. Chandler.
Mr. Mayor, I believe Mr. Caton was going to talk a little bit about that, and then I'll follow up. He'll outline his request, and then I'll just follow up with a little more information.
Oh, great. All right, Paul, all yours.
Well, thank you. Good evening, council and staff. I just want to make an apology in case my internet drops out because he keeps giving me messages that it's unstable. If it gets really unstable, I'll take the picture off. That'll give me a little bit of bandwidth. Anyway, thank you for this opportunity to reintroduce and tell you about the work of the Salmon Drift Creek Watershed Council, and especially what we do to benefit the city and the citizens of Lincoln City. As I just indicated, I'm Paul Caton. I live in Otis, and I am the Salmon Drift Creek Watershed Council Board President and have been a volunteer with the Watershed Council for 19 years now. A small career.
Yeah.
In 2005, the Salmon Drift Creek Watershed Council became an independent watershed council under the Mid-Coast Watershed Council umbrella. Mid-Coast covers the whole of Lincoln County, and it's a pretty big area. So we wanted to be able to focus our efforts on the areas around Lincoln City, and including the Salmon River, Devil's Lake, and its tributaries, Schooner Creek and Drift Creek. In case you're not familiar with us, our offices are on the ground floor, down there by the sliding door by McKay's, where several other nonprofits are located. We have been involved with a number of activities that have been direct benefits to the city. We've been monitoring water quality for about 21 years, actually, before I started with the Watershed Council. The programs are ongoing. We measure water quality and actually quantity in the rivers of the local watershed, and we measure a wide variety of attributes to identify problems problems that need to be addressed in the watersheds. In 2006, we worked really closely with the city to remove an unused concrete dam on Rock Creek. At one time, that was used to divert drinking water, but as recently, it's just, not recently, but back in 2006, it was just blocking fish passage on that creek. Also in 2006, I started with a small grant, the doggy pot program. At that time, nobody was cleaning up after their dogs on a routine basis. So I started installing stations, getting local businesses to help support the program. And over the years, this grew to about 12 stations at most of the beach access points. In 2017, City Park staff took over buying the bags and replenishing the dispensers. I was really glad that happened. It was a real problem trying to find almost $2,000 a year to buy enough bags for all those stations. In 2009 and 11, we had major projects in the Salmon River estuary to restore wetlands with a defunct Pixieland amusement park and Tamara Keys trailer parks were built. We worked with the, we raised more than $1 million through state and federal agencies, and most of that money was spent in restoring that to hire local contractors and other local personnel to do the work. That's what, in the last decade, the largest portion of our work has been in Schooner Creek, which is the city's primary drinking water source. In 2017, we worked with Lincoln County Road Department and Lincoln City Public Works to get grants from the Drinking Water Providers Partnership and the Drinking Water Source Protection Programs to do a detailed study of Schooner Creek Road, not the creek, to identify problem areas like undersized culverts and other potential direct sources of sediments getting into Schooner Creek. This sediment impacts the turbidity of the creek, increases the operating costs of the Lincoln City water treatment plant. In 2019, we again worked with Public Works to get another round of drinking water providers partnerships and source protection funds to do on-the-ground work to correct some of the problems we identified in the 2017 study. The Salmon Drift Creek Watershed Council also went out and got a third grant from the Siuslaw National Forest Stewardship Group to bring in some more outside money to help do work on the city's issues. In total, this past summer now, we took that nearly $100,000 that we had raised to make the most important improvements that we identified in that 2017 study on Schooner Creek Road to help reduce sediment getting into Schooner Creek. Again, we used the majority of the dollars to hire local contractors and other support people to do this work. This included replacing about 12 culverts, fixing several muddy road turnouts, road areas, and we actually moved about 1,100 cubic yards of waste dirt that had been piled up along the edge of the road that could have gotten into the creek, and we moved those to areas, secure storage areas away from the creek. We were able to put most of this $100,000 monies on the ground work. The reason we were able to do that is we're a pretty lean and low overhead organization. One of our biggest overhead expenses, however, is our rent. So effectively, we work with Public Works. We get a grant. The city gives us a contract, and then we have to pay some of that money back in rent. It takes away from our ability to spend that money on doing on-the-ground work. I hope you can see that, what we do is, a lot of the stuff that we do is help the city's wastewater treatment plant operations and also trying to improve the local environment. The Salmon Drift Creek Watershed Council is a 501c3, tax-exempt Oregon nonprofit corporation like the other organizations that occupy that space down there on the ground floor. As such, I hope the council will see the benefits of our organization to the city and consider our request to reduce the rent. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. And that's been a long time since I've heard the summary, so it's probably something we need to do more often. It's a nice reminder of what Salmon Drift Creek Council Act does. So we may have to make you as a regular annual update or something would be helpful. So thanks very much.
I will.
Council, questions of, yes, Councilor Hinton?
Hi, yeah, Paul, thanks for showing your face. It's good to hear what you guys are up to. I just have a question about the smaller creeks and kind of what your plans are for Agnes, Baldy, and Logan Creek. They each have their own issues, but I just wonder what you think about them independent of one another and what your plans are.
Well, actually, right now, we are working on an OWEB grant. It's ongoing. We're in our first year. Unfortunately, because of the COVID problem, Paul Robertson has not been able to get out there and do sampling. However, I think what we're finding, and it's kind of really early to speculate, but what we're looking for is situations where contaminations come off the smaller creeks and some of the wetlands around the city and get onto the beach, and could potentially, and it's kind of a speculation, cause situations like what happens with Devil's Lake when you have a lot of pollution getting into the stream. We hope to continue this study at least with this another 6 months to go, because we have slipped, and then we'll finally decide whether there is enough of a problem to try to find some solutions.
So it's kind of like the first step is just to sort out what issues are. I'm just interested in restoration for those creeks. So that's where my question was coming from.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with Logan Creek, which is in the Rhodes End area. There's a number of issues with sediment in that creek and the culvert there. At one point, those culverts were passable, and I think at some point in the future, when the city replaces the culvert under Logan Road, you're going to have to provide for fish passage, and maybe we'll get fish back into that creek. Baldy, I'm not really sure. I mean, immediately upstream of where it goes in behind the businesses in Nelscott area. I mean, that's a really nice wetland. And so my understanding is, and I haven't seen the actual numbers, but there are salmonid juveniles that live in that area. So yeah, there's definitely some need. Kind of the big problems are, of course, that goes under a huge culvert under what used to be known as Devil's Lake Rock. It's underground for several hundred feet. So I'm not sure it's really fish passable above that area, but I think the areas below there are probably worthy of enhancing.
Okay. And Mr. Chandler, I see in the staff report, current rent is $234 and some change. We budgeted $2,800 this next fiscal year as far as revenue. Is that correct?
Correct. That is, that's the current contract. Contract expires at the end of this month. They have received a rent reduction before to this rate of about $200 or so a month. In that area, or a part of the building that we rent out, we currently rent to the Career Tech, which I believe it's the matching per square footage, and that's what they brought their rent down, was to match that. Beefy uses the back part, the least favorable office area, or the backpack for kids, in which we do not receive rent or a rent payment on that. A few weeks ago, you had given me the authorization as far as delaying rent if our tenants asked for 4 months. It would be postponed and then put onto the end of their, or spread out over their lease. That's still available. That would not have required the city council's action in that your authorization would have given it to me. However, they're asking for a permanent rent reduction. I would suggest that if you wish to help and do it less than permanent, that you build it into the new contract, that it has an end date and it automatically goes up. So if you were to do 6 months or a year, the rent would be zero, and at the end of that period, it would automatically be raised to the current month. The city staff is not proposing a rent increase in this. The contracts have generally been for 2 years.
And are there separate utility charges, or is this all inclusive?
Debbie, do you know the answer to that question?
Yeah, we pay for our own internet and our own telephone, and probably the second biggest expense we have. In order to rent at the city, we have to have liability insurance. We also have to have, for protection of our offices, directors and offices, and insurance and employment practices. Just, you have to cover yourself nowadays.
Yeah.
So we have quite a bit of insurance just to occupy that space.
Yeah, I was just wondering about the water or electricity. Are those separate, metered, or?
Mr. Mayor, it says, let's see, I'm looking at the lease. Item number 3.21 says, for purposes of this lease, the term operating expense means all expenses or incurred by landlord. I'm going to assume, well, I better not assume. I will have to check. I'm looking for anything in the lease, but I'll have to check to be certain.
I doubt if it is metered separately, those spaces.
When I read it, I thought it said that the landlord is responsible for those.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yep, go ahead, Councilman.
Paul, do you pay for your own cleaning? Or you guys just do it yourself?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I do most of the vacuuming myself and keep the windows clean.
So you're your own expense. And what about a security deposit? Initially, did you guys ever have to put down a security deposit?
No.
We know where they live.
Yeah.
Other question, Councilor Mark?
Well, yeah, I'm just wondering, Paul, and nice to meet you. I've heard your name for years, but it's the first time I've seen your face. And where does your revenue come from? What does your annual budget look like?
Could you repeat that question? I'm
wondering how do you survive?
How do I personally survive?
No. The council.
Basically, we are 100%. I should say pretty close to 100% grant driven. Anything we do, we have to get a grant from some funding organization. As I said, Drinking Water Source Providers Partnership or Hebo Stewardship Group. When we were restoring Pixieland, a lot of people stepped to the table at that point throughout the state agencies. There was a lot of interest in that. But now funding is getting really tight, and we, like everybody else, struggle to, sell our proposals.
So I guess that would raise a question, Paul. If funding is tight and conceivably goes away, or there isn't an interest in donors to do the work you're doing, to help fund the work you're doing, what would the council change to, or would it non-exist?
Well, it wouldn't non-exist. As I said, we're under the Mid-Coast Watershed Council umbrella. And they would just reabsorb us. All of our assets and all of our files, piles and piles of files in the office. No, seriously, we work very closely with Mid-Coast. We use their tech team to help us filter and write good proposals. And so it would just go back into Mid-Coast.
I guess, and I'm just thinking out loud for council that, the work that this council does certainly is a positive nature for the city of Lincoln City, and not just the municipality, but the whole surrounding area. And we've done other leases and, give, in essence, credit for types of services that we've deemed beneficial to the community. And I guess that's kind of why I was asking the question is if we, in essence, forego rent, to some kind of condition or a credit given to the projects, the donations you bring in, Paul, every year that helps finish projects or do projects that directly benefit Lincoln City. To me, that's a great trade-off. And I'm just wondering, Ron, if a lease could be written that way, and I hate to venture out past, but the Salmon River, Drift Creek, Spooner Creek are all, and even the tributaries that Councilor Hinton were talking about, all positively impact our immediate area. And donations, funding certainly is well past this $2,800, that we get in rent. So I'd personally like to see the council, this Drift Creek Council, continue to do its work. But that's just me. So, Councilor Mark, you have a.
Yeah, I appreciate the comments you just made, Mayor, because I was having the same thought. And I worked, when I first came to town, I worked really part-time with the Devil's Lake Water Improvement District and was impressed by the amount of science that goes into understanding all the creeks that pour into the lake. And of course, the lake is, city property, borders, sits on that lake, and we all know about the problems with the algae and all that. So I do think the Salmon Creek Council does valuable work, and certainly probably worth the $2,813.04 a year that it's paying. I'm like the idea of reducing the rent, but I guess I'm just wondering, is there any concern among council or city staff about maybe a precedent that we, how many other hands are out there going, oh, what about me? What about me? I want to pay nothing also. Is that something we need to worry about, or just a thought in my head?
Well, I would say one of the things, if you notice it, typically in our city-owned properties, so it's we've got it, and it's our ability to provide a subsidy, if you'd like, but in essence, we're getting in exchange for deliverables in all these cases. So, and that's, I'm quite frankly, that's what we brought Backpack in for. They deliver back to the community to a great extent, and we had the space, so that was it. Seemed like an easy touch. Councilor Casper?
Yeah, I wanted to thank Paul for all the work that's been done, and I've been here a long time, like over 20 years. And I remember when David Hawker, and I believe it was yourself, came to before council and gave us an overview of what you did. And I was amazed because I didn't know. It's always on my list. Well, I'm going to go to this board meeting, and I never got around to it. So I would think in lieu of your rent, it would be really terrific if we could hear like a biannual report as to what you're doing and what projects you're involved with. And also in the back of my mind, I always have felt that school children never quite know about these watersheds that are around them and how we get their water. My grandson is always going, how do we get our water? You just dig a hole. I think there could be maybe an educational element if you need to branch out and expand in lieu of rent.
We used to have an educational grant, and it was very effective working with the students. We had a really great coordinator, but OWEB decided to get out of the educational grant, and now all environmental education goes through Lincoln County School District. They're doing outreach. I've gone to their meetings before to try to help support the teachers, and that's the way we work now, is just as a volunteer working with teachers to give them education. And if they want a speaker, and I recently went into one of the schools Taft Elementary and talk before a class.
Thank you. I appreciate knowing that.
Ron, did you have something?
Yeah, just a couple things. So we do pay for the electricity and water and sewer. They're responsible for phones, internet, the other types of utilities. In the past, when we have, such as the Culture Center, when we have, or Beefy, when we have not charged rent, the lease basically had that the rent is such, the city council it will not charge it, and it identifies the public purpose for which we would essentially donate the rent money. And so what I would suggest is that if you want to go down this road, then you should identify what the public purpose is. Also would suggest that if you, again, it's a two-year agreement, you just do it for that 2-year agreement.
I like that precedent. We've already got that established, and I like staying with that personally. Councilor Mark?
Yeah, it was just Mr. Chandler's comments just brought another question to mind, which is, are there other potential tenants clamoring for this space, or would it probably just sit empty if the council went away?
It is the space that has the greatest frontage. It's the only space that we have that has what we would call street frontage or glass frontage out onto the parking lot. The rest are back in farther. And as I mentioned, we do charge rent for Career Tech, for their drone program that they use down there, and we have forgiven the rent for Backpack for Kids.
And add to that, we're selective because we don't want to add to traffic congestion and parking in that area. So it's a limited space attraction, if that makes sense. So, yeah, Mr. Chandler.
I was just going to say, since you mentioned the parking, under the current lease, they have a right to use up to 3 parking spot spaces in the parking lot located on the roof of the McKay's Market.
So, I guess a lot on the table. What's the direction you'd like to go?
I would agree with the 2-year lease for forgiving the rent and tying it to the work that they're doing on behalf of the city. It would probably cost a significant amount more if we hired contractors, and it wouldn't be as consistent, and it wouldn't involve all the local volunteer time that I'm sure that Paul has gathered over all the years. So I would support that.
Can we have, Paul, maybe you and Mr. Epicello, or somehow can we identify the offsets, so to speak, or?
I think if you'd like me to bring back a revised lease that has alternate consideration for the use of the space, I can do that, and we've got precedent there with the Cultural Center lease. Of course, the other option is you just say the city's going to make a donation to the this not-for-profit in the amount of rent. The only thing that concerns me is that we usually make donations based on fiscal year, not on a 2-year basis. So the lease will have a subject to the local budget process kind of disclaimer, just as the Cultural Center, if you want me to do that. If you're just going to make a motion to, make a donation in the amount of rent, then just do it for the fiscal year, and we'll do it again when we get to the next fiscal year.
Councilor Casper?
That's what I was going to suggest, is just do it from year to year to see how it kind of goes this first year. I like
now what goes this year?
to see how our transactions go for this year lease. A year instead of 2 years.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. I would say I'd like to actually stick with the 2 years. The projects that usually watershed councils work on are pretty involved, and budgeting for that. I don't know, Paul, how do you, when your grants come, are they year to year? Are they couple years, or how do you budget? Mr. Apicello, take a deep breath. We'll be right back.
They probably, as I said, they're all task specific, and they have a small amount of administrative monies attached to them. In the case of like with the work we're doing on the smaller creeks that we talked about a few minutes ago, when the project slips, we ask for an extension on the project to last longer. So we stretch the money out over longer periods of time when necessary. We usually stay with the same, still working with the same total dollar amount. It's just, getting a little thinner over a period of time.
So, for example, Paul, your 100,000 with the Schooner Creek Road, how long was that project?
Well, we received those grants last year, and we had to wait till we got all of our work set up and ready to go. We just recently spent $97,000 since mid-July. So we spent almost all of that money. We're holding $3,000 back right now for a couple of things until we get Lincoln County Roads, that's their road, to do the inspection of the work we did, and possibly somebody from Public Works, possibly a city engineer, to go along and make sure it meets all their needs. And then we'll have pretty much the whole $100,000 will have been spent this year.
Yeah. So my point why bringing that up is there's 100,000 and we're benefiting our water supply, and here we're making noise about $2,800 rent. So I guess my point being is that this entity appears to me to be doing enough things throughout, whether it's 1 year or 2 years, but it's been 20 years for all that we've benefited. And I would hope that Mr. Apicello, working with Paul or whatever, we could identify those kind of broad scope of projects that continue to benefit the city, that could offset $2,800 worth of rent on an annual basis.
If you recall, for the cultural center, they come to you, they give an annual report, and you basically make a determination that they're doing what they are supposed to be doing to valid public purpose, public benefit, and the rent is, even though there's rent in their lease, it's excused because what you asked them to do, and I would imagine the exact same kind of situation here on an annual basis.
Yes. Is that consistent with what the council was thinking? Councilor Hinton,
Well, I can live with that. I was just thinking that just the way watershed councils work, they like to, if possible, have as much steady income or knowing about where their financial map is. And if we do it year to year, then they don't have that future planning piece, without paying rent. So that's all. I was just looking out for them.
yeah. Well, they do by keep those projects in front of them, which they're doing. So
right.
And so, Councilor Casper, you were also. Does that meet?
Yes, that's fine.
Your expectations? Okay. We seem frozen in space there. Any other can we make a motion? Then someone make a motion to, I guess it would be have Mr. Appicello bring back a lease. Would that be appropriate, Mr. Chandler, Mr. Appicello?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
If we need a motion, I'll move to direct staff to bring back a lease for the Watershed Council.
Second.
We have a motion with a second from Councilor Casper, and the content would be as we've discussed, some kind of an offset
Exactly.
for work. Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Are we frozen? Oh. Any opposed with a nay? Okay. Paul, I'm also getting this internet connection is unstable notice. Do you understand what we just did?
I did say that I'm very hard of hearing, so I'm going to have to maybe talk with Richard to make sure I understand exactly what's happening.
Okay. I don't think it hurts you at all, and you have the potential of no rent as long as you keep doing what you're doing.
That's what we want to do.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thanks for the presentation and filling us in, and keep doing it.
Thank you very much for your time.
All right. All right. Let's move on then to fireworks.
Okay. Mr. Mayor, thank you for this. This was an item that staff has been working on. The intent of our discussion today is to really find the expectations of the city council as it pertains to fireworks enforcement. Each year over the last 5 years, the city has done a little bit more in the trying to control fireworks, and the farther we go with trying to control fireworks, the enforcement of fireworks, the more expensive it's going to get. And so what we really want to do and to know as we start preparing for next year, for budgets and so forth, is what is the level of expectation the city council expects. For example, do you expect zero tolerance? That's a certain level of expectation. Something less than zero tolerance would have a different price tag or a different actions by the city. A few things to point out that are important so people understand as you're looking at this. First of all fireworks on the beach are prohibited, okay? But not all fireworks are prohibited off the beach. The state divides fireworks, permitted fireworks, into two groups. The first is called retail. Those are the fireworks that you can buy at the fireworks stands here in the state. And they can be fired off anywhere within the city, except, again, as I mentioned, on the beach. And there is no permit that's required to use those fireworks. The second group of fireworks that are legal are fireworks that are known as consumer fireworks, and those are ones that require a permit, similar to the experiences that we've had down in Cutler City, where fireworks went off and we used them. Another important piece of information that I want to bring up is that the fireworks sale or the sale of fireworks is restricted from June 23rd through July 6th. However, the use of legal fireworks has no restrictions. It can be at any time during the year for both the retail and the consumer fireworks, or the non-permitted and the permitted fireworks. As I mentioned, the areas where all fireworks are prohibited are Oregon State beaches, parks, campgrounds, state and federal forest lands. We prohibit them in our own parks as well. Okay. A couple of other things. Another question that came up is, or that I wanted to bring up is, can Lincoln City ban all fireworks? And the answer, as I found in the state statute, is yes. We can't be less restrictive, but we can be more restrictive than what the state allows. Okay, a little bit of, you have in your packet some of the information that the chief has sent, some information about some of the actions we've taken over the last few years. I'm not going to go over there. I did send to you earlier today and send it also to Tony so it could be added into the minutes. Just some general information about fireworks over the last 3 years. I'm sorry that I couldn't go beyond that. There was a change in how we reported calls at the police department, so it's not necessarily comparing apples for apples. We have seen over the last 3 years an increase in 4th of July fireworks and associated calls, and I'm just going to review those. The total events that we had, this is so you can see a little bit of the trend that we're seeing. Total events, this includes calls for services and officer-initiated activity. In 2018 was 137. In 2019 was 157. And in 2020 was 240. Calls for, and these are all for July 4th. Calls for fireworks complaints, 43 in 2018, 64 in 2019, and 97 in 2020. Fireworks related calls made by officers, 81 in 2018, 74 in 2019, and 87 in 2020. Number of contacts resulting in seizures, fireworks seizures, 13 in 2018, 29 in 2019, and 22 in 2020. Total non-emergency calls to the 911 center. In 2018, it was 155. In 2019, it was 213. And in 2020, it was 758. Total 911 emergency calls in 2018 was 26. In 2019 was 48. And in 2020 was 157. In 2020, we had 7 people who were arrested, 0 in 2018 and 0 in 2019. And we gave citations, 9 citations out in 2020, 0 in 2019, and 0 in 2018. Now, as I mentioned, it is not illegal to fire off legal fireworks anytime during the year. So we also took a look at where the fireworks were occurring. And I won't go through each of these specifically, but essentially in Ward 1, we went from 8, these would be calls through the month of July, excluding beginning July 5th. Okay, so we went from 8 in 2018 to 27 in 2020. In Ward 2, we went from 3 in 2018 to 12 in 2020. And I'm sorry, that's Ward 2. Ward 3, we went from 4 in 2018 to 7 in 2020. And the total for the whole city, in 2018, there was 15. In 2020, there was 46. So the trend, 3 years is a small trend, but it is a trend nonetheless, is we're seeing an increase in the number of fireworks that are going off. We spent some time visiting with various residents in our community to talk about their experiences. Generally, what we have heard is that it is worse today than it has been in the past, this year particularly. Those that have talked to us about doing something have been very vocal, that the city needs to do something and needs to do something more. As a staff, we've talked about various opportunities that we could take advantage of and still try to maintain and still stay within some of the laws. Some of the suggestions we've had from residents, quite frankly, are not legal to do. They would violate search and seizure laws and things like that. But there are a lot of recommendations that we might be able to do. As we go forward, again, anything we do is going to increase the cost to the city. And as I mentioned, the one thing that we've heard quite a bit is ban them altogether. Good idea. However, it doesn't change the fact that it still becomes an enforcement issue. Whether they're banned completely or whether they're banned, just the illegal ones are the ones we go after, it's still an enforcement issue. One of the things that, and I'm going to ask Sergeant Wynn to chime in if I make a mistake in talking about police duties, but one of the things that to cite somebody or to arrest somebody requires somebody to actually see the illegal activity go off. That it would either require a person who would then be testifying in court that they saw it, or it would require the police officer to see the event and then take whatever action they need to. Often we get a call, our police are out there within just 3 to 4 minutes. The event has passed, they did not witness it. Or we get a call from somebody who said, I heard this, it's down a block from where I live. There wasn't somebody to actually see that, and so therefore the action is not taken other than we respond to the area. Sergeant Wynn, did I get that right, or is there something else I needed to add?
No, you got that correct. We would have to have somebody that would say that one particular person had those illegal fireworks in their possession or lit those illegal fireworks off. If there's a whole group of people and there's a bag of fireworks and none of them claim it when we come up to it, and nobody is there to say, I saw that person had them in their possession, we cannot really do anything with that unless we saw them with it also. We have to have somebody that can say that was the one person that had it in their possession.
That's a little bit of a basic briefing, Mayor. We're available to answer any questions. You know pretty much everything that we've been trying to do over the last few years. Like I said, our hope is to be able to find what your level of expectation is so that we can plan accordingly.
So why don't we just ask that question of council? What is your level of tolerance? And I'll throw out, an outright ban, city-wide, all fireworks. So there's one. Councilor Hinton?
Yeah, the fireworks have escalated to a point of that is intolerable. It's a livability issue. It's not just a nuisance. And I think we need to give our residents, at least in the areas where the fireworks are usually heard, to give them a break. If the ban is for 1 year, maybe 2 years, and just to get the word out, because people are bringing more fireworks and they're happening for a longer time. For example, we don't have August on our chart, but I was keeping track. I didn't keep all of them, but August 3rd, 5th, 8th, 13th, 16th, the 20th, the 22nd, and last night there were so many, 7 of them at 9:15 p.m. and 34 or if they were repeaters, and there were 17, but I'm not sure which, but I counted 34 kabooms, big ones, and that was after 10 o'clock at 10:19 last night. So, and of course, I live in that north end of town where we have a considerable amount of visitors and considerable amount of fireworks. And so I worry for people who have PTSD, and I'm starting to get a unhealthy reaction myself to these, because it's really like hearing a gun firing off, or a rifle or something close when you don't expect it. Around the 4th of July, you know, you kind of expect there's going to be a few before the 4th and after the 4th. But when they go into, like, even last night, we're almost at the end of August, for crying out loud. And to have so many go off. I'd be very happy if we had a ban for a specific period of time at least.
Councilor Mark.
Yeah, I heard fireworks last night in Color City. It was probably before 10 o'clock because I was in bed by 10. I think it's time for the city to take some extreme action. I mean, as far as expectations, I don't expect the numbers to go to zero, but there's a culture that, I don't know that it's exclusive to Lincoln City. Mayor, you said you spoke to mayors over the holiday, over July 4th, and it was up and down the coast that people are bringing illegal fireworks. But I think maybe it's time to send a message to tourists that, well, local residents also, but also send a signal to people who feel they can come down here and abuse our year-round residents with the noise and they're scaring people, and people feel endangered by fire. And I saw there were some beach fires that got a little out of hand the past couple of days. So I wonder if it is, I think I might be in favor of taking some extreme steps, such as closing the beach after 7 p.m. on July 4th, and sending out the word that because of, and this incident in Spanish Head is such an abomination, and Sergeant Wynn, we really appreciate the work the city police did on that night. It was horrifying and terrifying. We can't accept this, and if people feel they can come down from out of the area and come down to Lincoln City and do whatever they feel like, I think we need to send a message that's not acceptable. So I don't know that we can, I would go along with banning fireworks. I think maybe it might take 3 years of letting people know that we just cannot accept this anymore. I don't know what else we can do. It seems like, from what I'm hearing, the amount of, I wanted to say manpower, I'm looking for the neutral word there, the amount of police, law enforcement officials officers that would need to be here in order to have a meaningful impact on stopping the behavior seems impractical. And I'll share a story. So July 4th, we heard fireworks going off on the beach near Josephine Young in Color City, and I went over there to see what was going on. We called the non-emergency number, and the dispatcher, my wife said the dispatcher sounded very harassed. We, at that point, didn't know what was going on at Spanish Head, so I can understand. But we're going to go over the beach and see. And as we headed over there at a fast clip, a dad and 3 little girls came running by us because they were just so excited to go see the fireworks. And I thought, if there's so many people that just really enjoy seeing this on the beach, I don't know how we can stop it. it's difficult. It's hard to enforce a law that people don't want to have enforced. So I think we need to find a way to change the mindset, and whatever that takes. That's changing the culture is my expectation.
Councilor Parsons.
You know, I don't really know what my expectations are at the moment. Last year, my expectations were this year to write more citations, and we did. I'm hoping, and I think this year might be a one-off due to the craziness going on. I know I'm not for a ban because we're trying to, they're already breaking the law. So here's another law to stop breaking the law. And also with the data we were given, it seems like our police force can only contact so many people no matter what. Between 2018 and 2020, you know, it's 75 to 87. We don't seem to be getting higher numbers just because we're getting higher calls. I think a ban is just gonna make it to where everybody just calls, and then it's which ones do we go to first. I see this, and I'm hearing a lot from specific parts of town and certain neighborhoods, and I think we need to maybe try a year of focused enforcement in these places where we're getting more complaints than others, and maybe that will calm it down a little. I understand everybody wanting to ban it, and I understand hearing from the citizens. I truly do get it. I just think basing a decision off of this 1 year is a little rash, personally.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Casper, thoughts?
I'm kind of in agreement with Councilor Parsons. It's pretty hard to enforce it. I live in Nell Scott here, and in the Spanish Head was where the incident happened. It's just down the street from me. And usually this is the very high area where we have fireworks. And this year it was only on July 3rd and 4th. And then after the incident, there was nothing. The next day, July 5th, there was nothing. I think it's because of the incident. And it seems to me that shows that there can be some kind of education or awareness about not doing these things. And to me, if we were to focus on fireworks at Chinook Winds, you know, at the bay, at the lake, and encourage people to, you know, enjoy what we have here, you know, promote a keep them at home campaign, something, educate them to enjoy what we can provide for them, and to let them know how much they do scare our residents. I mean, I live with a veteran who suffers with PTSD, and 2 dogs, and all my neighbors. So, and some of the motel owners told me, oh, they enjoyed the fireworks. They went down there and they watched them. It was like a ping pong game. So maybe to even encourage facilities that are on the west side of town to suggest that people go to where you watch fireworks rather than bring them. And I know it's going to be hard to enforce, so I kind of agree. It's hard to prohibit them. It just invites more temptation to bring them. It's a challenge. So that's my 2 cents. Focus on where they are and encourage people to be considerate of the people where they are guests.
Thank you. Interesting. I too, I'm not ready for an all-out ban. I liked the idea of, in raising the issue, that we may be 1 year off here, that this was a unique year, and that's what I've heard up and down the coast from other mayors. I think one of the things that we did learn was by not doing the show ourselves in Siletz area, Siletz Bay area, that there was very little activity in that ward. That unfortunately the activity moved north And I live in Ward 2 and near the 15th Street access to the beach. And there's plenty of activity there on the 4th of July. And it was more than usual, but much like Councilor Casper has indicated, there was very little since then. So it seems to be Rhodes End has gotten the brunt and a continuation. So I like, in Councilor Parsons, maybe we try another year with heavier concentration in the Rhodes End. We do know it's heavier concentrated with vacation rentals. It's flatter and seems to be more of an access for folks. But I wrestle with how we're going to, if we were to go to a ban, how we would enforce it. I have no idea, quite frankly, what we would do differently than what we're doing now. And we've got a huge manpower, officer power now, where we borrow others and from other departments. So I don't want to throw up my hands and say we can't do it, because that's not the case. But you know, I don't have an answer. I hear the frustration. Councilor Hinton, you seem to.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just so incredibly frustrated, and my neighbors are. I hear about it constantly. When the fireworks were going off last night, for example, I get calls. I'm notified. Did you hear that? It's over there on 70th. Did you hear that? It's over there on the beach, over by the. It sounds like the park. I mean, I'm getting inundated. So I have the fireworks, which is like a hit. I mean, a real blow. And maybe because we have the hill slope, maybe the sound is stronger here. I don't know what it is, but I'm just getting to the point where I don't know what else to do. And my neighbors are too. I have heard one suggestion, which I think is a good one, which is at the beach accesses, like when you go to, and I don't know how you would do this or if it's legal, but if they're illegal fireworks, and if there's some kind of agreement we can make with the state for state parks for the beaches, that we somehow control those fireworks at those beach accesses. And I don't know, like when you go to an event and you have to have your bags checked. And I don't know if there's any legal way to do something like that, but the majority of the fireworks in the north end of town are on the beach, except for this last year. It was pretty even up in the neighborhood, which is very scary because we only have one way out of here. And a fire, especially this time of year, could ravage this neighborhood and we wouldn't be able to get out. And so there's a lot of fear involved with the fireworks here. And I've talked to you before about the veterinarian expenses for the animals, and it's becoming so intense. And I know you hear me, but I'm just saying we really have to work on. Education didn't work. We did that this year. It didn't work. And so we need something more than just telling people to leave their fireworks at home. It is not working.
Councilor Casper.
Yeah, the Sheriff's Department used to have a volunteer program, and they disbanded it this past year because they didn't have enough volunteers. They were old farts like us. But they used to, because my neighbors are 2 volunteers, and they would patrol the beaches with their gear and their reflective vests and everything, and that helped. That really helped. It seemed to me that if the state could train some people to put on Rhodes End, it might be effective. because they could call the cops immediately. They couldn't arrest anybody, but they would say, you know, there's a $6,000 fine for climbing on the cliffs. There's da-da-da-da-da. It made an impact. The people did stop. And they would confiscate stuff from people, these volunteers. So it did help. Just a thought.
I'd just like to respond just for a second. Counselor Casper, we had volunteers working, I think it was last year, might have even been the year before as well. And they were at the beach accesses. They were providing bags when people went down so they could bring back their garbage. And they were just, the people were reminded, but people were accosted. It was so unfriendly.
But Counselor Hinton, did it say sheriff reflected on the back of the badge of the vest? That is very impressive to have this glowing sheriff vest on.
Okay, I would agree that would have helped them, but they still really got accosted.
So again, and you know, I don't mean to dilute any of the conversation, but it still gets back to enforcement, and that's the difficulty of it can be done, and as Mr. Chandler has told us, all it takes is money, because we can buy staff, I'm assuming. As we've heard from Sergeant Wynn, you have to see them. You know, it's tough. So that means a lot more people need to be deployed, you know, on the ground. And again, that can be done. It's a budget item. So if in fact zero tolerance is the issue, then we need to work that way. But I hear two people, you know, saying zero tolerance. You know, I hear three people saying, you know, I'm not ready for zero tolerance, so let's find something, you know, that might be effective. Is that true? Am I reading tea leaves here, or Councilor Mark and Councilor Hinton? I hear you both, you know, a total ban, say for some period of time, 2-3 years. But the other three, I hear not as tied into a total ban. Is that correct? Okay. So, Councilor Mark.
Yeah, and I think I said I would not expect zero tolerance. I don't think it's possible. I was really just sort of kicking around ideas. I don't know, to your point, how we could enforce a total ban. I do like, and I kind of forgot, I kind of thought about this some time ago, that a more focused effort at Road's End at least might be a tool. I agree that without the fireworks at Silet's, my sense anecdotally was that I didn't see as much activity on the Color City beaches this year as I have in the past. There was some, but it was not as intense. Although across the bay on the Taft Beach, I saw plenty of illegal fireworks going off. But maybe a focused effort, you know, not trying to enforce 7 miles of beach, but do a focused effort on Road's End might improve the chances of police officers actually seeing illegal activity, you know, witnessing it, and that might, I wonder if that might have improved their chances of actually making some arrests or citations or whatever it's called, and confiscating stuff. And would that send a signal to the community that we're serious about this? So there's no easy answers. Just another thought.
Sure, Councilor Casper.
What about if we focus on banning Road's End and figure out what it would cost to hire people to staff that, and train some volunteers for our other areas or other coasts, our other area, and just start at Road's End and say, okay, we're going to ban it here. And if it doesn't continue, then we ban the whole city. But start out as an experiment in Road's End, because that has been the most extreme, and see what it costs.
Oh, so this is a budget,
Yes.
is what you're suggesting. See what a cost would be to ban an area and rope it off, so to speak.
Yeah.
And you're talking both illegal and legal fireworks.
Yeah. It's just banned.
Mr. Chandler, thoughts?
Yes, this gives me a lot to work with, and I appreciate it. And I would make a request of not only the city council, but anybody who's listening and who's not listening and gets it passed on to them. As we try to come up with approaches to bring back to you over the next few weeks, I'd love the idea of brainstorming. Any idea that people have is not a bad idea. Please send them in. I've been very impressed with some of the ideas that we've already had. Things we haven't thought about that people have sent in through emails. So help us out, send the information, send your suggestions, and then we can start working through things and bring back our next steps to the city council. Likely will be coming as we approach the budget season.
I might, if I can add on to what you're saying, those who want to assist, we know the issue, and the frustration and the noise and all that. What I would think we're looking for is the enforcement, how to curtail. So that would be the concentration of ideas. Councilor Hinton?
I just had a couple of questions for Ron, and maybe for our police officer when you're sergeant, right?
Yep.
Okay, thanks. I didn't want to call you something that you aren't. So the thing on the one chart, the statistics over the 3 years, there's the total persons arrested criminal, that was 7, and the total fireworks citations, that was 9. Were both of those items, were they associated with the Spanish Head incident, or are they separate from that?
As I understand, they were separate. The arrests were associated with the Spanish Head incident. The citations were for fireworks, and not strictly associated with the Spanish Head incident.
Okay, because I thought they were shooting fireworks off, illegal fireworks right in front of the officers, so I would assume that some of those would be, but I'm not, that's why I'm asking.
I will check and get a breakdown of those.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so we'll expect to hear back from you and staff, Ron, on suggestions.
Yes.
All right. Can we move ahead to VRD enforcement? Was another topic of concern connected with both fireworks and COVID in the summer.
This has been a very hot topic, one that I know that you, our elected officials, receive a lot of calls, emails, texts, so forth. Also one that we receive as the staff. Right now, as we are approaching the end of the summer, it's a good time to take a look at what we are doing. My sense is from the calls that we receive is that we're not doing enough, or what we are doing is not effective enough. So anyways, just a little bit of background. Councilor Hinton had asked for more information than I had put in the staff report so we could compare years to years. We are assembling that information, and unfortunately I don't have that for tonight. But it is good to note how many VRDs that we have in the city. We have 590. In our R15 zone, we have 192 full-time VRDs with the cap set at 194. Plus we have 730 night limited VRDs. In the R1RE zone, which is the north end of town, we have 195 full-time, and the cap is set at 90. I might point out that that is 7 less than when we adopted the VRD ordinances. plus we have 30 VRDs, 3 30-night VRDs. I'm sorry, that's 7 less since 2018. In the commercial zones, we have 165 full-times, and then in other zones, we have 28. As I have talked with residents throughout the community about VRDs and what the problems that they're seeing, there's a few things in which I shouldn't say a few. There are things in which I, as the manager of the city staff, can adjust and make changes or implement, and then there are some that are policy decisions that would require your actions. Perhaps one of the biggest ones that we've heard is in the area of communication and the lack of visibility of our VRD enforcement staff. The sense is that people just don't know what we are doing, and the assumption is we're not doing much, or we are not doing much, depending on how you interpret it. One of the things that we have discussed is to employ the community policing principles that for our VRD enforcement. And I put some of the basic principles in that, and we will outline a little bit more of how that's actually going to take place. The second complaint that we hear quite frequently is the area of parking. There is some misunderstanding about parking and VRDs. Parking is often defined as a VRD issue, when in actuality it is simply a city issue, because we have parking issues everywhere. And let me give you an example of how it is associated with VRDs. Every VRD is required to have a certain number of off-street parking spaces. And those are based upon the number of rooms that they rent out. And they all have that in order to get their license or in order to get their license reviewed. It is not illegal to park on the street. We ask VRD owners and management companies to enforce that so that people aren't parking in front of the VRDs, but it is not illegal to park on the street in the city, except in areas where it's designated. We are bringing parking back to you next month and looking at how do you create no parking zones and how do you create residential parking permit zones. This is one of the issues that will require council actions and would affect the areas out in front of vacation rental dwellings, as well as the areas out in front of your own homes or your neighbors' homes. The next item that we received is on the area of occupancy. My sense is that while occupancy has generally been an issue, it's been an issue more this year. And that's in part been due to the restrictions the governor has put on the COVID-19 restrictions. Perhaps the biggest complaint that I hear associated with this is that our residents are saying we should not be the police. In other words, we should not have to call and say there's an occupancy violation. One of the things that we have been looking at is that if we call Sergeant Wynn and he sends out a police officer, they're going to go out and they're going to look at whether that occupancy, the number of people are there, violates their occupancy permits or violates the COVID-19. If it's dealing with the violation of their occupancy permit, they have to make a determination of whether or not those people are spending the night or whether or not they're visiting from somebody else's house, and they just have more in there than what they can sleep, but at night they go back to their place and people sleep there. That's a big determination that they have to make. Part of what we are looking, and this does not require council action, and again, looking for any more brainstorming that will help us. We received some great suggestions tonight, and I truly appreciated them. But one of the things is that we have within our ordinances the authority to audit registers. And we also have the authority to try to identify who's advertising for more than what they are permitted. So part of what we are looking at doing is trying to do a little bit of after the fact. If we're receiving calls, if we know there are frequent flyers of complaints, then dealing with some audits and trying to identify it even after the fact, and then taking action against the license in that way. There are many other opportunities that present themselves, and just like with the fireworks, more brainstorming we do, the more input we get from people, the better it will be. The next item that we received quite a few complaints about is in the area of garbage. And it's come across in two ways, at least as it comes across my desk. The first is the trash isn't picked up frequently enough for the times in which it's rented. So in other words, they may have weekly pickup, but they're renting it to multiple people, 2 to 3 people or tenants during the week. And the trash is just not sufficient in size for beyond the first or second tenant. The second is it's just too much garbage, and it gets put out on the street. It gets strewn out, or if somebody comes in on a Wednesday, their trash is picked up on a Monday, then it's sitting out there for the whole time. One of the ideas that we are working on, which would require council action, is that as part of the licensing agreement or licensing regulations, to mandate garbage bin sizes, garbage bin pickup, and garbage bin type of where it gets put out. So for example, we heard from Tina today and in the past that you can have a service where you leave it at your home or at the corner of your house and not have to bring it out to the street. One of the recommendations that came up is let's make that a requirement of the vacation rental dwellings, that their trash is that kind of a pickup service, minimum trash can size, frequency, and then it doesn't get pulled out onto the street, so it doesn't create the possibility of being strewn out. That would require city council actions. Noise is the other complaint that we generally hear about. Generally our practice has been is that there's a noise complaint, the officers, if they take action, it's against the person that is, or the people that are creating the noise. We usually have not used that as an enforcement issue on the license. That is something we can and we should consider on those. So again, the purpose of tonight is really to bring you up to speed with some of the complaints that we've been receiving and to do a little bit of brainstorming on what you are experiencing, what you're hearing from your constituents, where you think we need to improve upon our services. As I mentioned, and you heard tonight, many of the comments as I've been reviewing the reports have been fantastic. I really appreciated some that especially came from the REIA and others as far as how our enforcement officer works. But with that, Mayor, I just turn it over to you and for any information you want to pass on or questions that you may have.
Sure. You know, one of the questions that has come up long ago, and I haven't heard it of late, is are we not able as a city to, in essence, impose fees, whether it's a separate fee or a license fee, that would perhaps pay for additional enforcement personnel? Who can answer that for me?
My answer is I believe so, but I'm going to ask either Richard or Debbie to verify that or to say we need to look at it a little bit more. I'm sorry, it's to say yes, we can. We can cover our costs. but I'll defer a little bit to Richard.
Yeah, we can of course have fees that cover our costs. There's some case law about funding enforcement through the fees generated through enforcement. So I think there is some caution we need to exercise there.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, can I wait? Yeah,
It's on your question.
Okay.
I just happen to know that Newport does this. They cover the fee for their enforcement through their licensing.
But I didn't understand, Richard, the caution that you were throwing out if in fact we were writing citations to cover the fee, to cover the enforcement? Okay.
I think it's probably just a finance issue or how it has to be written correctly so that you're basically not having the enforcement officers fund their own jobs.
Right.
Directly by, it's kind of like a conflict of interest issue.
Sure, okay.
So,
Mr. Townsend.
just need to be careful, that's all.
Yep. Mr. Townsend.
My understanding also is that we cannot put enforcement, we can't pay for enforcement through license fees.
So it had to be an additional kind of fee that would cover.
Basically, it would be through the citations themselves or whatever.
Oh.
But not, that's my understanding. I could be wrong, but my understanding is you cannot impose an enforcement fee as a cost of licensing.
Huh, okay.
Or a permit application.
Okay. Well, those are the kind of things that I'm wondering about. And we may, maybe once, Richard, you could check Apicella with Newport to see what they're doing. Councilor Casper.
Would any of that be able to be recouped from TRT funds? Because it's from vacation rentals or motels or just.
Well, the answer is that goes now into police and parks and stuff that's designated. Yeah, so it's already there in police. But, yeah. Thoughts out there, comments, concerns? Councilor Casper, you have the floor.
You mentioned something about noise. Don't we have some kind of city ordinance where businesses can't begin before 7:30 or 8 in the morning? And isn't there some kind of requirement where businesses cease after a certain time at night? So wouldn't that be logical for like VRDs or, rentals to say, okay, 11 o'clock, it's quiet hour, or just to, suggest it, enforce it, make it a guideline?
Mr. Townsend, do you know our noise?
My belief is, I haven't looked at that in a while, but my understanding is that applies to everybody and everything in the city.
Not just business.
Okay.
There are some exceptions, I think, like for construction noise at certain times, but otherwise, I think it's for everything.
So, other than the number of people, it's the same garbage, noise, and parking. And the number of people, I would agree with Ron's observation. It probably has to do with the COVID directive by the governor, because people lease properties well in advance, and changing the number of bodies allowed in a house halfway through is tough on a renter, especially if they're not getting the deposit back. So I'm not surprised in that area that we're having difficulty. But the other thing, I guess, the concept of having the neighbors police, that's not new, and we knew that based on our staffing. it sounds like it's getting out of hand, or neighbors are less tolerable, and so having to work harder at making the calls. And that's where I was going, you know, do we have to staff up? I think already this is probably the most expensive ordinance we have to enforce. And so always looking for another way to pay for getting it into the area of compliance that the public would like. So looking for suggestions, thoughts, Councilor Hinton?
I have a question and then I have a suggestion. My question is regarding parking, and because that continues to be a pretty big issue. Can we amend an ordinance, and I know we're going to be talking about parking pretty soon, but where we can have off-street parking only for the VRDs and at the number that is allowed on their license? Mr. Appicello?
Obviously, you can amend the ordinance. That's not the current situation, in the sense that anyone is allowed currently to park in an legal off-street parking space. So a visitor to a VRD park in a legal space. We do have the storage of vehicle ordinance, which tightened that up to has to be less than 24 hours. But yeah, we can amend our code. The last time we talked about this was several years ago now, and the decision at that point was to leave it as anyone can use a legal parking space.
Yeah, I think it'd be worth looking at amending it, because I think that would really help. It help the police, because I know they get called a lot, because I get called a lot. But and quite frankly, I think to answer your question, Mr. Mayor, that people may be becoming a little bit intolerable, but I doubt it. I mean, just what I can see and what my neighbors call me about, they're usually specific houses. So if the police had a tool like this to use, it'd be much easier to manage. And so it would actually alleviate a whole bunch of issues because of re-offenders, let's say, because we see the same people year after year usually coming. And then my suggestion is kind of twofold, is that if we move the VRD enforcement all under the police, and I mentioned this at our last meeting, but move it all under the police. And a further suggestion, because Rhodes End has such a huge number of these VRDs in this neighborhood, that we have a nice little pump house that used to be used for meetings, and maybe they could be stationed there at least part-time, and they'd be right there. They would get to know the actual houses, which ones are the full-time livers, which ones are the VRDs, and they could really get a sense and a feel for what the constant houses are, the houses that provide constant phone calls from the neighbors to the police. It would be an easier way to manage. It would be a friendly way. We have a great, our neighborhood association, REIA, has a great relationship with the police. They worked hard together to put the neighborhood watch program together, for example, and they attend the neighborhood meetings. It's just really a very nice relationship. And I think it would be a good way also to help with the fireworks situation, because, and maybe the hours could be varied so that the enforcement officer could be actually at the location to provide accessibility during the hours where most of the calls are coming in. because now it's 8 to 5, and that, quite frankly, except for garbage, you're not going to hear too much, but.
Other thoughts? So I'm wondering, is it specific, Councilor Hinton, what you alluded to is that there's identifiable facilities that are repeat offenders by way of the house itself, not necessarily the occupants, but the house attracts parking and noise or parking.
Right. There are repeat people that keep coming back year after year. They like it and they enjoy the beach and the whole atmosphere and all of that. So there are people that you kind of grow to understand that they're going to come and they're noisy or whatever the issues are. But particular houses that house more the larger houses that will house the bigger number, like up to 16, anywhere from 10 to 16, there's that much exponential noise and parking and all the other issues just get bigger and broader and spread out into the neighborhood. So those are absolute. I'm sure that the police know them already, but there are ones that I would have thought by now would have lost their license. So I'm kind of surprised that, the same complaints for the same houses keep coming, but yes.
So I'm wondering, we had on public comment, Meredith Lodging made under public comment. So it goes to wondering what kind of outreach has gone to the property management companies and their willingness to participate in this discussion and find a solution, since they're not obviously not as close as the neighbors, but they're certainly close to the issue.
They aren't always available. Oh, there you are. He jumped. It depends on when you call them. If you call them during the day, you can reach somebody. But I don't know about education. I'm just reacting to responding to the question about calling them. But at night, I've not gotten any.
No, I'm thinking about ahead of time, much like we're having a discussion now, to have them at the table and whoever they are, pick 5 top property managers, have them in the room, and have that kind of conversation of we're frustrated with what we're seeing. I don't know if that, Mr. Chandler, if that could be possible, because they clearly must know it's not working, or there's difficulty, or maybe again it's one area because of the concentration, but we ought to try to hone in on that as well, and then go with through the property managers.
Okay.
Other, Mr. Townsend, did you, it's old familiar territory for you, but do you have any thoughts that you've?
There's really not much I can add to what Ron has said. I'm hearing some interesting things. Roads End presents some unique situations because I think all but 2 of the BRDs in Roads End were approved under county's rules, and that we get into whole things with non-conforming use and going back and getting them, making changes can be difficult. But I think there's a lot of options. Ron has told you some. We've come up with some others, other possibilities, and some of it just would involve tweaks to the licensing ordinances, not to the zoning itself, which is, that's a can of worms we don't want to reopen, I don't think. But some tweaks to licensing, I think, can do a lot. I'm very enthusiastic about the garbage things. The idea of maybe a pilot program on some increased enforcement, whether that's like Friday and Saturday nights, having perhaps hiring like an off-duty police officer to be responsible or something, to be able to cruise, and that can have it can even address fireworks to some extent. But there's things that can be done. I think getting people together and brainstorm is a wonderful idea. Getting the management companies in. One limitation there, of course, is not all VRDs have a management company. A lot of them have just have a local rep.
Yeah.
So, but I think we can certainly get the majority of them, and probably what amounts to the places where we get complaints. And speaking of complaints, by the way, I want to say, there are places where we get multiple complaints. It's important to remember that a complaint is not equal to a violation necessarily. And actually some wording in our licensing provisions in chapter 5.14 could use some tweaking to make some clarity there on whether everything needs to be adjudicated in municipal court and the judge has to actually find the person guilty, or for that to constitute a violation that counts towards revocation. So with some minor tweaks, I think things can be accomplished. I'll leave it at that for now.
So, Ron, I think we're dumping back to you and would like to pursue this, not just leave it ebbing.
As I mentioned with fireworks, very impressed with some of the ideas that have already come on improvements that we can make. Again, I think we generally know the issues. So if you as a council or any of your constituents have ideas, I'd love to hear them. Send them to me, and we can consider those and start working to improve the situation that people are faced with.
Okay. Well, let's move on then back to you, Ron, with the COVID update.
Mayor, the only thing I really want to add to what was in the packet is some information that we heard today. The city or the county commission has extended the 24-hour hold rule for the lodging industry in the county to September 29th. There was a little bit of discussion today on whether or not, or about the commissioners reaching out to the cities to ask how they're doing and if they are considering or reconsidering the 24-hour hold rule. The second is that there was no detail on this other than they announced that there is an outbreak at the Inn at Spanish Head. Although I have no further information on it, it's just that they announced it. And then the other thing that does really affect us, the governor's emergency order is set to expire on September 4th. We have tied our emergency order to the governor's emergency order. We're expecting that she will extend that, and I would use the authority that you've given to me to extend ours to match that if she does. If she doesn't extend it, I'll be back to talk to you about what to do. But we are expecting that she will extend that.
I would think so, yeah. Any questions of Mr. Chandler regarding COVID? All right. Why don't we then, do you want to roll into a city manager's report, Ron?
Yeah, I just have one final item. Abby Edwards, our HR director, has asked if you could schedule about a 2-hour work meeting so that she can talk to you about mine and Richard's evaluations. It's not doing the evaluation, it's the form that she's using. She needs some input directly from you. And I was looking at next Monday at say 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning for about 2 hours. Would that would be August 31st. Would that work for you?
10 would work for me.
10 o'clock?
I'm out of town, but maybe you could, I would probably go along with whatever the consensus was.
Okay.
And I may or may not be available, but I can try. I've got other plans.
Is there a preferable date? We've been trying to keep those on Mondays. Would you want to push it to the next Monday?
For Tuesday.
Or you could do Tuesday. The next Monday would be September, I believe it's the 7th.
That would work better for me.
It isn't that Labor Day?
That's Labor Day weekend.
Yeah.
Okay.
About Wednesday, the 2nd of September.
I might still be out of town, but like I say, you guys go ahead.
Wednesday, September 2nd, 10 a.m.
Sound all right? Okay.
Okay. That's all I have, Mayor.
Great. All right. Mr. Appicello.
I do not have anything for this evening.
Great. Okay. How about, is there anybody, we're into public comments. No one here in the chamber, and I don't see anybody else on the Zoom box. So I guess that's it. Mr. Chandler, do you have any come in on email?
No, no emails.
Thank you. Let's counsel. Mr. Mark, Councilor Mark, you got anything for?
No, thank you. Nothing for me.
All right, Councilor Parsons.
Yes, I know how this works, so I'm going to bring it up again. Can we please move the radar speed signs around more often than we do?
Okay.
That's it.
Okay. Thank you. Councilor Casper.
Me?
Yep.
Yeah, I just want to take like 45 seconds here and refresh people about the achievements of the urban renewal plan that we just finished here from 1988. It comes in this wonderful thick book if anybody wants to look at it. But just to remember all the achievements that we did do with the funding from urban renewal were including parking lots, vehicle charging station, RV dump, Ocean Lake signals and signals at Nell Scott, traffic signals, sidewalks, undergrounding, pedestrian crossing, turnouts like Schooner Point, restroom improvements, skate park, various plazas throughout the city, widening of left turn lanes, street extensions, signage, public art, economic development loan programs, community gardens, picnic shelters, archways like the one in Taft and the 15th, redevelopment planning, zoning, drainage, pump station upgrades, beach access improvements, water line infrastructure, sewer line repairs, Cutler City trails, just a few things that we accomplished with our urban renewal funding. That's it.
Great, thank you. Councilor Hinton.
Well, I would just like to piggyback on Councilor Casper and just say that your taxes aren't going up. It doesn't increase your taxes at all. It's just a redistribution, so no worries. And that's it, and thank you.
All right, thank you. Yeah, and I would just like to throw out that it appears that the month of September is National Preparedness Month. As the flyer says here, disasters don't wait. Make your plan today. And the first week of September is home inventory is what they suggest. But I think it's always a good thing in the midst of the pandemic and our own emergency preparedness and experience that we think beyond just COVID and be prepared for other types of disasters as well. So with that, I don't have anything else, and would call it an evening as we just zip past 9 o'clock here. So thank you all for joining us, and we stand adjourned.
Right.